Yo, what's up, guys? This Topics here, and this is actually a Patreon requested video. So shout out to Patreon members. If anyone else is interested, the link is in the bio. If you want to support me there, we right now have two membership tiers. But yeah, this was requested to do a tank tier list. Now, this is a mid-PTR tank tier list. I don't want this to be a long video, um, because we're gonna get straight to the point. There's been a few weeks of PTR testing. There's still a few more weeks, so this is kind of like where we are right now in the middle. I'm sure there's going to be a few more tuning cycles still. However, I think that we've seen enough and kind of see the trend that Blizzard is going in that I doubt that the tanks that are the best are going to fall to the bottom or vice versa. There may be some small tuning with, damage here and there. Maybe will affect tankiness a little bit, but I don't think they're going to do anything to shake it up too much at this point. I'm just going based off of previous PTR cycles. For example, last PTR, DH was looking like the best, and Warrior was looking not too bad either, and that's pretty much what ended up happening. So I've split these categories up: overall damage and profile. We have 9 categories, by the way. They're all worth 5 points except for B-Res, which is 2, because I don't think B-Res is worth like an entire damage profile of points. But I do think it's worth maybe, a couple points, basically half of one of these categories. So overall damage and profile, this is how much output you can do, your overall damage to the end of a key, but it's also, do you have good priority or single target as well, because that matters right now in high end plus. Base defense is how tanky you are without doing anything. This is without like pressing a defensive, but probably only having your base mitigation up. Situational defense is, do you have a lot of defensive suppress when a tank buster comes in or when you're about to take a lot of damage? Do you have good defense against magic, against physical? Do you have immunity? Stops and CC. Um, this is single target stuns, AoE stuns, silences, hard CCs, stuff like that. Group utility is going to be, does your party benefit you from your toolkit? Fits dungeon pool. For this season's dungeon, season 3 of the War Within that we're talking about here, we have Arakara, Dawnbreaker, Floodgate, Priory, Ecodome Aldani, the new one, Halls of Atonement, and then the Tajvest dungeons, Gambit and Streets. Couple quick things to note are that the next season dungeon pool, there's some dispels, poison and curse. There is some large pull requirements. Halls, Gambit, Floodgate, even summon Arakara. There's some pretty large pulls that you're going to want to do in there. And there's also going to be a lot of kiting that needs to be done, in my opinion, to drop stacks. So you got to think about how your class handles all that. Raid buff, that's self-explanatory. B-Res, self-explanatory. And mob control and gathering, this is going to be gripping, gathering pulls, the movement that you have, things like that. So let's look at DH and how I graded this. I gave DH a 5. It's doing really good damage and has the best priority of any tank. Base defense is average. If you like only have spikes up, you're gonna be kind of squishy. But obviously most of the time, if you're playing your class well, you're gonna have your debuffs out and Immo Aura running, and you're gonna be completely fine. But at a base value, DH is probably a 3 here. Situational defense is 5 though. If you're playing your class right, you're gonna be giga tanky because you're gonna have your debuffs out, your Immo Aura up, you're gonna have Fiery Brand on your prior target. You're gonna press meta when needed, but most of all, you have really good self-sustain. Literally the best in the game, better than DK, a class that's built for self-sustain. Stops and CC. You know, I don't really have to say much here. Chains into silence. You have Chaos Nova. You also have a hard CC in prison that you can use if you want to skip stuff. You have misery that you can use if you want to skip stuff or use it as a stop. Your group utility is low though, because all that you really bring to the group is darkness, and that's sometimes used on yourself. You don't really bring anything else. But it does fit the dungeon pool really well. DH is great at kiting. And the dots and bleeds may not affect DH as much as other tanks because they have good self-sustain. Raid buff is, one of the best in the game. Chaos Nova, magic damage. There's so many caster comps. There's a lot of caster and magic classes, so that's a 4. Doesn't bring a B-Res, but it does have, S tier, 5 out of 5 mob control and gathering. You can glide around, disengage. You have 2 charges of leap, you have a charge, you have the hunt, which is like a basically super long range charge, you have your throw glaive, 2 charges, you have your chains, you have like infinite ways to gather pulls, and so that's very easy as a DH. So total score 32. Next, DK. DK is, I think it's the lowest damage overall out of any tank right now in the PTR, and it doesn't really have great prio either. Also doesn't help that you want to stand your death and decay, so you don't want to move around too much because that'll do some damage for you. So I gave DK a 2. Base defense is also 2. You guys know that if you go into a mob with nothing as DK, you're just going to get one shot. And that does happen to inexperienced DKs. It also doesn't help that you need to be doing your offensive spender to actually get bone shield charges. So if you're out of combat too long, you're going to drop your bone shield charges and you're going to be paper. So your base defense is pretty low, but you do have good situational defense. Contrary to popular belief, DK has a lot of defensive cooldowns. Vampiric Blood, Icebound Fortitude, Rune Tap, Lichborn, AMS. You can use AMZ on yourself, and obviously you have a huge self-heal. So I'm giving DK a 4 there, but it is less self-healing than DH, which is hilarious. And you don't, you're not great against physical damage. Probably a little bit more paper than DH, so 4. Stops and CC is about average. You do have grips and sleet, which is very valuable, but I feel like they could use one more thing here. Your group utility is really low, like DH, you only really bring AMZ, and after that's gotten nerfed to 4 minutes, it's much less value, so that's really all you bring to your group. I don't think it fits the dungeon pool that well either. It doesn't have any dispels. It also is very slow, gathering these large pulls that we're going to have this season. And because it doesn't bring a raid buff, it doesn't, really help casters that are typically unkept classes work in this dungeon pool either. So I gave it a 2. It doesn't have a raid buff. It does have B-res, and its mob control and gathering is also not that great. It really can only grip a few mobs in. And other than that, it has to like single target Death's Caress stuff that are ranged. So it's not great for gathering or mob control. So overall score 18. Bear. Bear overall damage is also very low. I say it's pretty much on par with DK, but it does have a higher base tankiness. Bear just has a ton of armor. It's typically pretty good against physical damage. Its situational defense is average. Again, it's got some good defensives it can use, but it does struggle against magic defense. It doesn't really have anything to counteract magic other than some passive choice nodes, or not choice nodes, some passive talent nodes in your tree to maybe help that a little bit. Stops and CC, I'd say it's on par with DK. It doesn't have grips, but it does have Vortex if you want to use that to keep mobs in. It does have Incap Roar, which is an AoE incapacitate, and it does have your Vortex Typhoon combo if you want to use that. It just requires a little bit more setup, so I don't think it's that great, but it's definitely not terrible. Group utility is 5 out of 5. I don't think I have to go too much into this. Druid is like the most loaded class ever. You have Poison, Curse, Dispel. You have Nature's Vigil, off healing. You have single target root. You have mass root if you want to talent into that. You also have Stampeding Roar, which is like a group speed buff. So really good. I think it fits the dungeon pool a little bit better than DK, just the fact that it has some dispels, but again, I don't think it's gonna be that great at kiting. And again, the classes that are not target capped, that are gonna be great in these large pool dungeons, I don't think would elect to play with Bear over DH, so I'm just gonna give it a 3. Raid buff is a 4. I think it's very good because it benefits everybody. Mark of the Wild, no matter what class you play, you're gonna get something out of Moreverse. It does have a B-res, and its mob control and gathering is pretty bad, similar to DK. Bear is slow. The only thing it can really do is Moonfire stuff from ranged and taunt stuff. So it's going to also struggle gathering large pulls. Alright, so overall score 28 out of 32. Or 28 compared to DH's 32. Monk. Overall damage is a 5. It's doing giga damage. It's like the most overall of any tank right now. It does have decent priority too, because your Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick and Tiger Palm are all gonna hit your primary target, and then your other abilities like Keg Smash and Breath of Fire are going to be hitting AoE. So I think that it's definitely a 5. Its base defense, I also think, is the best of any tank, and it's just because of how stagger works. If you go into a mob with nothing up, you can take a lot of damage up front, and it's just going to go into your stagger, and you do have time to react with one of your brews, unlike any other tank that you need to be very careful how you're pulling and how much damage you're taking up front. Obviously, the more you can do that, the more it helps on Monk, but I just think Monk is the most forgiving, and because of that, I gave it a 5 here. Situational defense, I think it's pretty good. It's not as good as DH because it does have very long cooldowns. Like Fort Brew is a very long cooldown. Dampen Harm, it's kind of an average cooldown, and it does have Diffuse Magic for some magic abilities, but they're all pretty long cooldowns. So you're basically relying on playing the little mini game of your stagger and your purifying brew and celestial brew properly. If you can nail that down, it's going to be great, but there's not a lot of proactive and reactive stuff you can do with Monk. You just have to play it crisp. Stops and CC, I think it's pretty much on par with Baron DK. You only have leg sweep and ROP when you're playing packs, and then you do have paralysis that you can use to hard CC stuff and skip stuff similar to Imprison, but it does not drop the aggro table as much as Imprison does. You can still easily aggro stuff if you walk too close to Paris, so it's not as good either there. Yeah, I'd give it a 3. Group utility, it's better than DH and DK, but it's not as good as Paladin or Druid, so it's a 3. You bring a Poison Disease Dispel, you can do some off healing. Obviously, Ring of Peace and Paralysis can be used for more than just stops, but they can be used, for some cool skips. So I had to give Monk a 3 here. I think it fits the dungeon pool just as good as DH. It's fast. It's going to be able to kite well. It's going to be able to heal itself or stagger a lot of the bleeds and dots. So I think it's going to be fine as long as you play Fizz comp. It's not a 5 out of 5 because it is restrictive in terms of what comps you can play, but I think this dungeon pool, it's going to be great. Raid buff is a 3 because it's restrictive and only certain classes benefit from Mystic Touch. Even though it got a big buff, I still don't think it's as good as a Mark of the Wild or Chaos Brand. It doesn't bring a B-Res, but its mob control and gathering is slightly better than Baron DK. Just, it doesn't have a lot of ranged aggro abilities. Like, you're not going to probably be using Crackling Jade Lightning because it's a channel. So you really can only taunt stuff and throw Keg Smash from a distance, but you are very fast, so you should be able to run by and physically aggro the mobs a little bit faster. So I give it a 3. Overall score is a 30. Paladin. Paladin's damage was a 5. It just took a huge nerf. Now it's, not that great, so I gave it a 3. It's definitely not on par with like DH Monk or Warrior. Its base defense is also not the best. Paladins can be paper if they're not playing properly. Like, if you walk into a mob with nothing up, you can get one shot. But it does have great situational defense, just the fact that it has a huge arsenal of defensives and ways to mitigate damage with Bubble, Sack, Bop, Lay on Hands, Spell Warding, and then you obviously have your 2 defensives of Ardent and Guardian of the Ancient Kings. Stops and CC, really good. You obviously have infinite kicks with Avenger Shield and Divine Toll. That's basically like its own AoE kick. You just don't have an AoE stop, a silence, or like any grips or tethers. So I didn't think I could give it a 5, but because it has infinite kicks, it does get a 4. And it does get a 5 for group utility, similar to Druid. Poison Disease Dispel, Off Healing, Sack Bop, Spell Warding, Freedom. It's loaded. It does fit the dungeon pool well because you can play with Prop Pally whether you're a physical or a caster comp. Just because, I think it has good synergies with all those, and it does have very good burst AoE damage even though it got nerfed. So it's going to excel in large pulls, especially with the amount of kicks that it has. So I give it a 4 there. Which is why the raid buff also got a 4, because everyone benefits from Devo Aura 3% DR. It's not as restrictive. It does have a B-Res, and I think its mob control and gathering is the best in the game, tied with DH. You have a lot of ranged abilities that generate damage and threat, like Avenger Shield, Judgment, Divine Toll. It's very easy, and you can be running around on your horse while you're doing all this. So it's very easy to gather spread apart packs at a range as prop paladin and have them run in towards you while silenced by your shield and your divine toll. So I think its mob gathering is very, very good. Overall score 33. And then last warrior. Warrior's damage is very good. It's like second best behind, or I would say it's actually based on par with DH and Monk. The only difference is I don't think it has as good of priority, because I think we're going to be playing Mountain Thane now. It looks like they nerfed Fueled by Violence and our bleeds, which Colossus really needed. And so some people have been trying out Thane. It seems to have been doing giga damage, and Thane is easier to play and is actually baseline tankier. So I think actually we might be playing Thane, and so our damage is very, very big. There's just not that great of prio, so I gave it a 4. Base defense is a 4. It's like some of the tankiest baseline in the game, because like as long as you have shield block up, you're basically invincible physically. So definitely baseline tanky. It's just its situational defensiveness has gone down now that we lost spell block. We do have a strong defensive and shield wall. And then we have spell reflect on a very low CD, which now gives us 35% magic DR, which is big, and reflects the first cast on us. So I think we're gonna be pressing spell reflect actually a ton more, because you're gonna want to use it on magic tank busters, or if you're taking like magic AoE damage of any kind, even a dot, you're gonna be pressing spell reflect. But it lost, like I said, spell block, which is huge. And if you don't have spell reflect available, you're very weak against magic. So like let's say there's very frequent magic damage happening, you're going to be weak because Spell Reflect does have a CD. So stops and CC, though, I think it's the best in the game, tied with DH. You have a 20-second... If you take the right talent, you have a 20-second Shockwave CD, which is an AoE stun and knock-up. You have a single target stun in Stormbolt. You have the longest lockout AoE silence in the game of 6 seconds. And then if you want to talent it, you can talent into Intimidate and Shout for an extra AoE fear. So it's basically the best in the game, tied with DH for stops and CC, I would say. But its group utility is low. It only brings Battle Shout, which is like the weakest raid defensive in the game. It's only 10% HP. That's a joke. They need to buff that. I think it's average for fitting the dungeon pool. There's more comps it can play with than Monk, because a few more classes benefit from Battle Shout than benefit from Mystic Touch, like Frost DK, Havoc DH, and Enhancement Shaman, and Sin Rogue. So it's less restrictive with the comp. So I didn't want to put it too low, but I do think Prot Warriors may have a hard time kiting and dealing with some of the dots this season. So I don't think it's the best tank for the dungeon pool. Its raid buff is average. Battle Shout, like I said, it's maybe not as strong as Monk's, but it can benefit more people. So I kind of even it out with Monk, but it's definitely not as good as DH, Bear, or Paladin's raid buff, in my opinion. It doesn't have a B-res, but it does have, really good mob control and gathering. Not quite as good as Paladin DH, but, you can leap, you have 2 charges of charge, you also have shield charge, and then you also have unlimited axe throws that are easier to use than something like Crackling Jade Lightning, or like DK's trying to death caress everything. Axe throwers are really easy to use, and they're fast. So I think it's really good, not quite a 5, but a 4, so Warrior gets a 27. So, looking at these scores, guys, let's place this on the tier list in the exact order that they belong. So, first will be Paladin and DH. They're only 1 point away from each other, so we're going to do Paladin and DH up here. Next, we have Monk. I think Monk I'm kind of going to put on a tier of its own. It's 2 points away from Bear and 3 from Warrior, but it's 30, so it's still up there. So I'm going to put Monk here, if it'll go there. Next, we have Warrior and Bear at 28, 27. So let's go back there. Warrior and Bear, 28, 27. And then last, we have DK, like way below everyone. So let's go put DK on here. So here is the tier list. I feel pretty good about this. These are my picks for the classes that will be meta. I do think Brewmaster is a decent alternative meta. I just think that it's very restrictive in the comps that you can play. And in a season that requires very, very large pulls, I still think you're going to favor uncapped classes like Mage, Boomy, maybe some DK. Um, it will work good with Hunter, and Hunter is good, so they do have that going for them. But typically, the other physical classes are all capped, and I think they might struggle in the highest of keys on very large pulls, just killing them fast enough. Because I don't think some of these dungeons you can afford to pull small. Like I don't think you can pull small in Gambit, Floodgate, um, even halls in the starting area. I think you're gonna have to pull really big on high keys, and I think they might struggle biz comp. So I'm not completely sold on Brew yet, um, just for that reason alone. So I do think there's a better shot, um, one of these classes being meta. Paladin's damage did get nerfed, so DH is doing more, plus has more prio. So even though they were ranked the same score, um, I would lean towards this just because of the recent nerf, but it wouldn't surprise me if they're both pretty good. Um, and then these two classes are on the same in my opinion. Warrior's doing a lot more damage and has more mob control and stops than Druid, but I think that Druid is built a little bit better for this season just because they have more group utility. They got battle res, they got the curse and poison dispel, and they are actually pretty tanky too. They just don't have as good of damage, so it's gonna be kind of be pick your poison. Do you want more group help, um, or do you want just straight up more damage and stops? I think either way though, I think Brew is gonna be like the go-to fizz comp option, and these are gonna kind of be secondary fizz comp options, and that's another reason why I think this makes more sense. Um, these are the three notorious fizz comp tanks. Bear can actually play with casters too, just because it brings Mark of the Wild and any class benefits from that. But typically, if you're fizz comp, you're kind of preferring one of these two. And if on a season where Brew is very, very good, I think it will outshine Warrior. Um, it's almost kind of doing that this season too. You see Brew doing higher keys than Warrior. And then the DK is just bad. There's nothing much more to say about that. It needs a lot of help in a ton of areas, and it's not great for this dungeon pool because of its lack of ability to kite, no dispels. It's just very weak in some areas. Damage is very, very low, and you're gonna have to do large pulls. And it doesn't have a raid buff, so yeah, Blizzard needs to do something about DK before this is gonna see any play in the highest of keys. And Frost DK is looking broken, so any DK main is just gonna be playing Frost, I think, unless you're really low at the blood. So this is my tier list. Warriors just switched to Mountain Thane. If they get more testing and it actually proves to be as great of damage and as tanky as some people are saying, it might move above Bear or up to the same tier as Brew as like another option for Fizz comp. But I think right now Brew is just outshining it, and is better suited for this season's dungeon pool. So this is my tier list, you guys. Leave a like and comment. Let me know what you think. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Peace. Big shout out to all of the Patreon subscribers. It's because of you that I'm able to continue making World of Warcraft content. I really appreciate it.